Hi, I'm Jonathan Gifford. I'm the co-author with Dr. Mark Powell of a series of books about organizational behavior and more specifically about what we believe business can learn from the performing arts. Mark and I both had parallel careers in business and the performing arts. I worked in newspaper and magazine publishing and spent most of my career playing saxophone in various blues and jazz and soul bands in the evenings and at weekends. Mark is a senior management consultant who is also a world championship winning ballroom dancer. And what we've come to believe is that the mindset that performing artists bring to their work can have huge benefits in the world of business to help business people be more innovative and to develop more effective, creative working relationships with their colleagues. So I'm here with Dr. Powell today. Mark, can I ask you to kick off? Tell us, if you would, what you feel are the key differences between the business and the artistic interpretations of the concept of performance.
It's a very interesting question, I think. It's interesting about the word performance itself, because if you actually ask people, and I've done this before, how would you define performance? You get very, very different answers, but actually most of the answers you get in a business context are always the same, which is performance from a business context is around sales and revenue and margin. What I consider output measurements, they are, in other words, what they say is the performance is the outcome of a whole bunch of other things that would drive the numbers. So I thought it was always kind of interesting, because ultimately in the business context, the performance, either metrics, they are just existing because of other things that have happened, but you focus on the metrics, not on how you got them. In the arts world, it's very, very different, because actually the performance is physically what you do as an artist. So if it's a dancer, it's the dance, it's the competition. If you're a musician, it's the gig, it's playing live to an audience. If you're an actor, it's performing the play. For them, the performance is something you do. The outcome from that performance is the metric. So they think about it in a very, very different way. So the businesses are focusing on the output, and the performers are focusing, in a way, on the input. The performance is everything. What businesses don't do, though, is they don't focus enough on the driving forces of the metrics in terms of how I delight my customers, how I basically make sure I've got the best people, how do I do different things that might achieve different results. They get very obsessed with tracking the outputs, the performance metrics in their world, but they don't spend enough time, in my experience, thinking about and focusing on those things you can't necessarily measure in an objective sense, but ultimately which drive the output measures that they focus on. So performance thinking for me is about changing that whole mindset within a business context. And actually, let's start with how artists think about it. Where would that take us in terms of rethinking how we deliver our own performance and how we actually can be more successful as an organization? And I think my experience is actually there's a lot businesses can learn from the way artists think about performance.
Thanks, Mark. I was thinking about our very first book, My Steam Engine is Broken, was about trying to create organizations fit for what we called the Age of Ideas. And we wrote about the influence of Taylorism after Frederick Winslow Taylor, arguably the first ever management consultant, born in the 1850s, hugely influential in the second industrial revolution in America. And his whole thing was that management consultants should analyze how workers went about their roles, find the one best way, the most efficient way that they could carry out their task, and then employ a whole bunch of supervisors to make sure that workers carried out their task in that one best way, because you don't want workers having crazy ideas about how they might do things differently, obviously, imagine. Yeah, even in 2001, Taylor was voted as the most influential management consultant of the previous century. So his work still has a surprising influence on our thinking today. But it's at odds, surely, with what we see as the need for constant change. Not the one best way, but constant exploration. Can you tell us more about how you see the ongoing influence of Taylorism and the need for innovation in modern business?
There's kind of two challenges with that. One is eventually everybody does the same thing and you're back where you started. So the first problem with that way of thinking is, well, what do you do when all of your competitors have done exactly what you've done? Because it's a zero-sum game. I'm back at the beginning again. Because what you're effectively doing is you're focused on, in reality, within the concept of process efficiency, it's around technical mastery of the process. But eventually you've mastered the process. Eventually your competitors have mastered the process. How do you win? Well, you're not going to win by being technically the best, because they're all technically pretty well the same. So the only way you can win is you have to seek other aspects of performance. You have to look for different ways of doing what you're doing, not just doing what you're doing in the technically most proficient way, but saying, how can I try different things that might present what I'm doing in a slightly different way that looks slightly different or slightly better or slightly more interesting. I might play with the timing and the music. I might play with different positionings with my partner, whatever it may be, doesn't really matter. What can I do differently? And it's a constant search for something new, because if you don't, you can't win. Same with, if you take a play, right? If you're going to go out there and do Macbeth, well, Macbeth has been performed 100,000 billion times. So every time you go out there as an actor, the first thing you're trying to work out is, how do I do something a little bit different with this play? Because everyone else has done it every other way. I've got to find something new, something fresh. I've got to think differently about it. And part of it is the amount of effort that goes into that becomes about 80% of the effort. Only about 20% goes into maintaining technical proficiency. And I think that's where the Taylorism has kind of run out of steam to a great extent. And I think that's why increasingly people are saying actually innovation and how you innovate is starting to become the next big question mark that organizations are asking.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. We're going to look a lot more at innovation in future videos. We're also going to look at ensemble behavior, and we're also going to look at the difference between practice and rehearsal. So thanks again for listening. We hope we will see you again soon. Bye for now.